Good morning. It's Friday, February 3rd. I am Marcel Brown, the most trusted name in technology, and today is time for another Facebook Live Friday. So I've got some exciting news, at least exciting for me anyway, I think, I found out that local grocery store Schnucks is going to roll out uh, InstaCart. Is a service that basically you can do home grocery delivery. So from what I've read, you basically can pay per delivery. You can pay a yearly charge for unlimited deliveries, and basically you get to buy groceries online and get delivered to you in an hour or 2 hours. And to me, I'm totally geeking out about it because that sounds great. You don't have to go grocery shopping, and if you think you're low on something for the evening meal or whatever, you can order it and have it to your door pretty quickly. So they roll out February 16th in the St. Louis area, and I just read that that includes Metro East area where I live. So I'm really hoping that Schnucks does roll it out to our local store and covers the whole area as well, because I think that'll be a pretty game-changing service out here in our area. So I'm glad that Schnucks was, smart enough, I guess, or visionary enough to roll out this service that at this point I think it's only been available in other East and West Coast markets. So really happy to see that coming here. Additionally, also other stores are going to have it. Straub's, which is a St. Louis local store. Shop and Save is also a regional store. Whole Foods Market, Costco, Petco. So glad to see that service again rolling out here in the St. Louis area and even in the Metro East area. So hopefully that'll help get us a little more high tech in this area. Related note: a couple different companies, including Purina, are rolling their IT headquarters into St. Louis, or relocating them into St. Louis. So there's going to be a lot of IT jobs that need to be filled in the St. Louis area, and I'm glad to see that more companies are recognizing that St. Louis is becoming a technology hotspot. And with the central location in the country, I think a lot of people are looking, a lot of companies are looking at that as St. Louis is a underserved market, underdeveloped market, and growing. And because it is in the middle of the country, it kind of helps just from a strategic standpoint, being centrally located for many things. So, side note. Anyway, I get a lot of technology questions, but some of them are more common than others, and I wanted to go over them here briefly, just to give you guys a sample of the type of questions I get. So, one of the more common ones on the business side is actually something that I can't do too much with, but because I have knowledge about it, I'm happy to share it with my clients. And that first question is about credit card processing. So the usual question is, who should I use for processing? But it kind of breaks down into one of two options. Should I go with a service like Square, which has become very popular in the last several years? Very easy to use, very easy to sign up. You can sign up and start taking credit cards that day, and the swipers that they send are inexpensive, but now they got the newer services that you can use the chip cards or even Apple Pay. And so for a small business that's getting started, literally you can sign up online and be taking credit cards very quickly. So that's positive for the Square side. However, their transaction rates, the rates you pay them to take credit cards, are pretty high, 2.75% per swipe, and even higher, I think 3.5% if you do a keyed entry, a non-card present transaction. So those rates can get very high if you do a lot of transactions or a high volume of credit card sales. So then the other option is, well, the traditional type of credit card processor, where you pay a monthly fee, and that, however, your per transaction rates are usually quite a bit lower. So that's the question. Now, what's the answer? What should I go with? Is it the traditional processor or a Square or a similar type of service to Square? And basically it can be summed up. Obviously, every situation is different. You should talk to a qualified credit card expert, which I know, in particular one person that's very good. But depending on where you live, I can recommend others. The basic answer comes down to, as I insinuated earlier, the number of transactions you do, the volume of transactions you do. So if you basically do $1,000 or less on low value transactions, say $20 or less, then you may do well with the Square card or Square service or similar type of service. And that's simply because the fees involved with a traditional processor start to kind of make sense at that point. So if you start to do more than $1,000 or you're doing higher value transactions, then the fees that Square charge start to add up higher than the fees that a traditional processor would charge. So that's the basic simple answer there with the credit card transactions. Of course, if you have more questions, certainly get a hold of me. I can put you in touch with a credit card expert who can take a look at your bill and your volume and that sort of thing and kind of answer your question a little better. Now, another question I get affects both businesses and individuals, and that is I usually get a panicked call from someone that says, I just got a message on my computer and it says that I have some sort of virus or someone's spying on my computer or this or that, some sort of dire warning and consequence. Your computer's about to crash, all sorts of stuff. And to call this phone number for support. A similar scam is where someone's at home and they get an actual phone call and it's someone from, quote, Microsoft or Google or whoever they're pretending to be, and saying that, oh, we discovered a problem with your computer and we want to help you and log in and take care of that. So either way, whether you get an actual phone call at home or whether you get a pop-up on your computer warning you of all these dire consequences, it's certainly always a scam. Whether it's your own antivirus software or whatever, it's never going to tell you to call a phone number for support. Well, if you have security software, its job is to take care of the problem for you. So no need to call someone to handle that. So, and of course, companies like Microsoft and Google and Apple and all these other companies, they never just scan the internet looking for problems on people's home or business computers. That's just ridiculous, really, when you think about it. So either way, unfortunately, a lot of people do get lured into these scams. And so the general process that happens is you call in or they call you, whatever, and then eventually what they want to do is take remote control of your computer. And then at that point, they'll either actually do something malicious to your computer, or they will pull up various log files and different things and point things out in an effort to scare you, to say, oh, look at all these problems. You've been infected with this or that, or people are spying on your computer for a long time, or whatever it is. They'll just smoke and mirrors to try to scare you into thinking that you have a problem and they can take care of it. Well, of course, at that point, then they try to take your money, charge you for some things, some services that are entirely unnecessary or this or that, whatever they're doing, they're just trying to get your money. So point is, if you get one of these web pop-ups, most of the time it's not an actual virus. It's just a web pop-up. The website that you're on or whatever, they might have been compromised with something to just display your message, but it's nothing more than a web message. And even if it tells you don't close this message or your computer will crash or whatever, or don't reboot because your computer will crash, you can trust me that those are just there to scare you. It's just a scam. It's just trying to scare you into calling that number and eventually taking your money. So if you have a concern, get in touch with someone you trust, like myself or another computer professional, someone you trust, so that they can look at it and they're not going to just take your money because they're scammers. So, but these scams have been happening for 2-3 years now, and they just seem to keep proliferating. So the more we can educate people to say, hey, if you see something like this, don't freak out, the better it'll be. So certainly share this video with others. I've written articles about this on my website before as well. Just spread the word, help people understand that if they see something like this or if they get a phone call, it is a scam. Call someone you trust instead. Okay. So finally, one of the most common questions I get is related to internet speeds. And generally the question is, I'm not getting a fast speed as fast as I should be getting. What is the problem? And just to give you a little background, it was only about 3 to 4 years ago that the top speed was about, in our area anyway, and most internet providers in the nation, was about 10 megabits, and then it jumped up to 30, and that was great. And then very rapidly after that, it seems like the speeds across the country went from 30 to 60 to 100, even up to 300 in some areas. And if you really want much faster speeds, you can get that as well. Although most of the time it's really expensive, but there are some services that even give you 1,000 megabits a second at a reasonable cost now. Those services, though, are limited. That's like AT&T Gigapower and also some Google Fiber and various things like that. However, the fact that the internet speeds in the scope of a few years went from, say, around 10 to 100 or more, suddenly what happened is that the technologies in the routers kind of lagged behind. So where router manufacturers were targeting relatively slower speeds, they could use technology that was not as powerful, that was a little bit slower than cutting edge networking technology. They could get away with that because they didn't need that speed, and that was fine for the time era. However, what's happened now is people may have routers that are 3, 4, 5, 6 years old, and these routers weren't designed to handle 100 megabits or faster speeds. So oftentimes, and especially on the wireless side, oftentimes what you see is that people are maybe getting 30, maybe 40 to 50 at the most, and they're paying for 100, or in some cases with businesses or some places around the country, 200 or 300 megabits, and they're not getting half of that. So the simple answer is to take a look at your router, and if you have an older router, 3, 4 years older or older, probably is not a bad idea to look at getting a new router. And you can get them for under $100 now that are much faster and can certainly support 100, 200, 300 megabit speeds. So there's always, of course, more details depending on your situation and the devices you have, and wireless speeds versus plugged in network wired speeds, that sort of thing. But for the most part, I would say in probably 70 or more % of the cases I see where people are saying I have slow internet speed, the router is almost always a culprit there, in that they had an older one and just replacing it will give them much better speeds. And at that point, if there is any remaining issues with the speed, then we can troubleshoot either whether it's the internet provider or whether maybe they have some wireless issues or they have older wireless devices that just aren't going to go any faster. So that sort of thing. But you should always take a look at your router. How old is it? In some cases, the router may not actually be that old, maybe just a year or two, but it was the technology in it may be many years older. So some people bought a new router, but it was a model that was 3 or 4 years old at the time. So that's really the key, is the age of the router itself, but also the age of the technology. So anyway, if you're getting higher speed internet and you're not seeing what you think you're seeing, check your router, and that may be the culprit there. And certainly, again, if you have questions about that, let me know. I answer these questions a lot to people, and you can ask these questions on my website, marcelbrown.com. So anyway, that's it for today. Another Facebook Live Friday. I will see you again next week.